Nice to see everyone here. Welcome to our AI4 conference. We're going to be talking about user-centered design, responsible AI, and lots of good stuff. So with us, we've got our esteemed panel here today. Hopefully get this going and work from there. So we're going to start with our first, of course, easy question for everybody.
Introduction first.
Yep, introduction. That's our first question. Introduce yourselves and role and company. Since I have the mic on, if I may start. Scott Beliveau. I'm from the United States Patent Trademark Office. Anybody here have a patent? Oh, we got one. So if you think about USPTO, what's our mission? What's our role? It actually, if you look around you, just about everything around you has been patented or trademarked. And when you look at that kind of conceptually, it ends up being about 41% of the entire U.S. economy is related to IP and IP related. So the way it works, which I think is a good concept for this panel discussion, is in exchange for your disclosing or sharing information about your new idea, your invention, your imagination, or the economy of your imagination, you receive an exclusive right to that particular idea. And then in exchange for that, people can then build the next great thing upon that. So my role at the USPTO, I have a lot of hats, a lot of roles. I don't think I actually fit in the the bio. But generally, it's all surrounding things in data and how we use data constructively. I tend to manage about 200 years of America's innovation and look at different ways to be able to leverage that constructively in all of our efforts, for whether it be AI, ML. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sanjay.
Thanks, Scott. My name is Sanjay Rajagopalan. I work at Vianai Systems. We're a startup founded in 2019 out of the area of about 100 employees so far. We focus in the MLOps space. We have solutions in model management, monitoring, and we were founded with the intention of kind of serving the need for enterprises in the area of human-centered AI. We define human-centered AI as a world in which humans and AI work side by side in partnership, and AI to benefit and amplify human effort. My own background is in design. I have a PhD in design from Stanford. From about 20 years ago, the design thinking movement, when it first started, worked at SAP for about a decade, running their design product, kind of overall strategic design initiatives. I worked at Infosys, which is a large engineering and IT services company. So very, very close engagement with a lot of different types of projects that are across industries. Most recently, as head of design and strategy, I have gotten involved in all of our client projects. So I have a lot of recent experience with building and taking productive, very strategic AI applications for clients across multiple industries. I have a couple of colleagues in the audience. If you like what you hear, please do reach out. There's Dean and Jean and Dan out there. So.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mona Baset. I'm the Vice President of Digital Services for Intermountain Healthcare. We are a large health system based out of Salt Lake City, and we have 60,000 caregivers, almost 400 clinics, 33 hospitals. So we cover 7 states, primarily in the Mountain West. And I head up the area that really looks at consumer engagement technologies and caregiver engagement technologies and the strategies that really enable some of those experiences. So my team is responsible for everything from our website to our intranets to our mobile apps and patient portals, our CRM practice, and of course, intelligent automation. We have a small and mighty and growing group that really launched AI for our organization really just about a year ago, and it's pretty amazing what we've been able to accomplish just in that short period of time. My background is in a lot of different industries. I was talking to Will, financial services, where he works, healthcare, and I sort of grew up in marketing, digital marketing, consumer experience, and then moved to the technology side a few years ago. It's been a really interesting transition because it's still that same consumer focus, really understanding the needs, designing to those needs, and then having direct access to the technology that can actually enable those experiences. So it's been a good place.
All right, good morning. I'm Will Lee from the Vanguard Group. I'm a senior advisor and principal data scientist at Vanguard. So I'm also leading the risk and control part of our model governance program. So Vanguard is one of the largest financial services company, and we're focused on aligning our interest with our shareholders and our investors. Right? We don't have a separate Wall Street boss. We serve our investors directly. So I guess one of the key statistics is our average U.S. fund expense ratio that's below 0.1%. Right? So that's the testament of how we align our interest with our shareholders. And in terms of myself, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of focused on a lot of areas within Vanguard, trying to apply AI to cybersecurity and financial fraud detections. So at the same time, trying to ramp up our model risk management and model governance program. All right. So with that, I'll turn it back to Scott.
Yeah, I get the actual formal kickoff question. So, looking at human-centered AI. So let's just start with sort of a good thought experiment or scenario. This is going to go to you, Sanjay. Sure. You're the lucky one. Executive in an enterprise company comes to you and they say they're considering productionizing a new AI tool across the company, which would supposedly automate certain tasks and save X dollars. And some of you in the audience hopefully have come across a similar scenario. So what would you recommend they consider so as to launch this initiative responsibly?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great setup. I'm sure very familiar to many. There's a lot of excitement about AI and what it can do. There's, of course, hype associated with it, but everyone realizes there's something there. And there have been initiatives that have been fairly exciting that people have experienced. So it's not unusual for people to have this idea that how quickly can I deploy my solution, which seems to work really well in the lab, and how do I, get it productive in the hands of people? And very often in that excitement, maybe some of these concerns are lost because you're just trying to get a very valuable tool in the hands of people and drive business value. So I think in the early, so to answer the question, how would I, kind of advise such an executive? I would start by looking at their maturity in terms of their AI journey, right? So early on, I think having a few very rapid successes is very important to get the validation. I think if it is, a low-hanging fruit, high-value kind of application, solution, first time, then there is a lot of impatience and hey, I just need to get this stuff working in the hands of people. And I think you can brute force that and say, well, let's just put all the controls around it, make sure it works. Let's have a fair amount of investment into managing this and getting in the hands of people fast. But I think the story changes with scale. And the reason for that is rather than having, there is an immediate impact aspect of value that comes from deploying AI solutions, but there is also a notion of longevity, right? So the simple idea of longevity is AI is where the logic is in the data, and the world changes, things happen, the data drifts, And a solution that works really well in the lab has trouble working in a productive environment for a long time. Quickly, within, let's say, a few months, you find that the AI system isn't working that great. So the first level of thinking long-term and longevity is really, do you have the framework in place to monitor these kinds of changes to the way AI works? It's unlike traditional enterprise software where the logic is in code and the data is just flowing through and triggering some kind of business process. Here, the logic is actually in the data, which is changing with time as the world changes and as needs change. So that's the first stage where, in scale, where you need to start thinking about things like monitoring the performance and responding to drift in performance and all of that. Now imagine it's not just a handful of models, but tens or hundreds of models, and then you start getting into things like resource utilization, right? Are these things just kind of gobbling up storage or CPU at a rate which is unsustainable? These are not, easy to know upfront. So you need to have those kinds of frameworks in place. And I think where it kind of intersects with this notion of responsible AI is where there are many risks associated with AI, which deal with things like bias or ethical use of AI or reputational risk of using AI in a certain way, which I think are very unpredictable in early stages when you're just talking about the what, this does X, Y, Z and drives this kind of business value. But over the long term, these risks, while they may be remote and low probability, they do have the potential to have a very, very high disproportional impact on the business. And so, as you can see, as you get to tens to hundreds of these models, if you don't have good systems in place up front to make sure that these solutions have been deployed with these things in mind, then those risks compound exponentially. And you have the possibility of really running into very, very hairy, tricky issues related to bias or ethical use of AI or responsible use of AI. So the answer would be, hey, if you are early in the journey and you just need to get some quick wins, go ahead, get this in the hands of people and brute force all these things, making sure that you are careful about them. But if you're in that trajectory where you're getting tens to hundreds to thousands of models in production, then you should really be thinking about the infrastructure for explainability, for monitoring, for transparency, for validation, for governance, these kinds of fundamental tools, processes, policies, which you need to have in place to avoid those catastrophic events, which could have two impacts. One, of course, very expensive and can completely derail all of the assumptions you made around the ROI, but also diminishes the trust in AI as a whole. And this is where the connection to human-centered AI comes, because when trust is diminished in AI systems in general, then adoption tends to go away. Not just for the solution that failed, but for all solutions that use similar technologies in the backend, because that trust is a very fragile thing. Any additional thoughts on that?
I think the only thing I would add, great response, that low-hanging fruit, it's the low-risk fruit. So it's like the apples and the oranges. You don't start with the really exotic fruits when you first start. But what we found, especially in healthcare, I know other industries are like this, we're so risk averse. And so to even get somebody to try something sometimes is very difficult. So when we first embarked on our program, we really looked at things that would truly elevate human work. And we wanted to jump in and say, what's going to give us the biggest ROI? How are we going to get this huge program approved? But a lot of those things are very high risk. So we started looking at things that people just didn't like to do. It was just manual, labor-intensive, no brain power work. One example is that there were some computers and monitors sitting in our remote monitoring stations, and they would just shut down. And so there was a person or a couple of people who every day would spend like an hour trying to find all the ones that weren't on anymore and restart them. So we figured out a way just to do it automatically. Every morning, all those things would restart, or if something was down, it would just restart. So super low risk things. And then once you show people that those things work and they're accurate and there aren't any mistakes, then you can start going into some of the more just riskier, more sensitive issues. So that's brought us a lot of success and just create some momentum to start with.
Yeah, I love those insights. And especially around picking the use cases that are low risk. And, from risk management perspective, we like to say yes and, right, rather than no, you can't do this. So the and part is really thinking about, hey, we got to do these innovation, bring in these automated tools, right, deliver value quicker to our market. Again, from a financial services perspective, we're operating in this hyper-competitive space, right? If we don't innovate, we'll be left behind. So, from kind of the model management perspective, we're thinking about, hey, let's putting in kind of automated guardrails and road signs, right, to help our model developers, model builders to deliver value quicker, right? So that's the approach we're thinking about, just more lightweight approach, and just using the word, yes and, kind of putting in these guardrails to help people move a little safer.
Yeah, and I think, if I can summarize, it sounds like look before you leap. And the big T word, trust, and when you're deploying these particular initiatives, efforts, to make sure that you're not risking or jeopardizing trust, because that can, really be that momentum killer, as it were, to, avoiding, the next great or big thing. So that just, I always like to have sort of maybe a contrary thought to that. So next question goes to Mona. So they come back and they say, okay, all these considerations, great, but they're slowing down important cost savings. So why should they prioritize responsible AI ahead of the bottom line impact? I guess in the healthcare industry, what would you say back to?
This boss is very relentless. I would say that you can have both. So that's the great thing about AI. So what we have done, certainly we started with some low risk things, but we were able to move quickly for a couple of reasons. One is we ate our own dog food. We automated the governance process, and the governance process is really key. So if you have a good governance process that can be documented, it can also be automated. So everything from audits to testing, validation, we do that in an automated way, and I think that has really sped things up quite a bit and keeps us very responsibly focused. I think the other thing that we did, and the reason why such a tiny team was able to deliver so many automations in such a short period of time, is that we trained citizen developers across our organization. So we have 400 plus people who do other jobs. This is sort of just an interest to them, that we've trained to use some of the automation tools, and they can go build their own automations, which is really incredible. So we have 400 people out there. I call them citizen developers. They did not like that term. They said, we're automation designers. So they are automation designers, and they have helped us within less than a year build a total of almost 2,000 automations. There's like 2 million plus tasks that are being automated now in such a tiny period of time. My automation team that reports into me is 3 people, a manager and 2 people. So to be able to do that so quickly, we had to, back to the trust word, we had to trust that people could learn how to do this, could use it responsibly, and then we have those automated governance tools in place to be able to look after all those automations and flag things that maybe need to be looked at a little more closely.
All right, you love this automation theme, and so we totally embrace on the automation part as, again, our kind of yes and theme, right? So we actually I guess I love the term eat our own dog food and drink your own champagne, right? However you look at it. So we build a model, the AI ML model, to do model risk management, right? So we also subject that model to our model governance and risk assessment process. So just think about the whole concept of, so we call our model supermodel, so that's a shameless plug for a upcoming technical session that I'll talk about more technical details on how to build that supermodel. So that's essentially, I guess our goal is to build trust and also speed up the process, right? Provide what we call continuous advice to our model builders so they know where they stand from a risk perspective, as well as they can get actionable advice on the specific controls that are missing or should be enhanced in their model.
And I'll kind of re-emphasize the importance of the differences between a kind of one-off versus operating at scale. When you talk about bottom line impact, operating at scale, thinking about the hows, the whys, and if you should even be doing something is the primary bottom line concern, right? Because at scale, those risks compound exponentially. And so when you think in terms of bottom line of a point solution, you're thinking about what? What does this do? How does it drive value? And is that having a business impact? When you're operating at scale, there are so many whats that you can no longer individually track them. So what you do is you focus on the hows and the whys, the process, the policies, and the frameworks by which you bring those to production, monitor them, govern them, and take them off when they're not performing well. So bottom line consideration, this itself is very much dependent upon the maturity level or where you are in your AI journey. Early on, bottom line tends to be very much on the whats, but as you mature and scale, the bottom line consideration becomes the hows, the whys, and if you should be doing something at all.
And if I can emphasize, we always are it goes back to the trust. We're always not looking to, if there's a problem to be solved from a, customer centric perspective, we don't always jump to AI. I think that's important to, as practitioners in the analytics field, that, it doesn't always, what's the saying? You don't need a flamethrower to kill a fly. Sometimes you just need a better fly swatter to do it. And I think that, as building that rapport, that trust with people is extremely important as part of that particular effort. With that, I've got the next question. Actually, there's no silver bullet for doing AI the right way. What are some various aspects involved with responsible AI? Now, to that question, we're all kind of in different industries, so it may be kind of an interesting different paradigm between all of us here. For myself in the federal government, there's a executive order, which is EO 13960, on the use of trustworthy AI. And that particular executive order more or less has, let's say, two parts. One is that it should be beneficial to people and our citizenship. And the next, it needs to be done in a way that promotes trust. So it kind of silly was walking over here. Anybody see all the restaurants going around? A lot of famous restaurants. So it made me kind of think of, well, how do I equate this back? And my thinking was, is Will? Anyone know who Will I Am is? Or am I just totally striking out on everything? So a quote from Will I Am was, if you're a chef, no matter how good you are, you don't cook for yourself. You cook for others. You cook for the joy it brings to others. So when we're looking at, kind of going back to that executive order and connecting it, we try to do really three things. One, we want it to be human-centric. We want people to come to our restaurant and want to enjoy what they're eating because of what we're doing. Number two, we want it, and this kind of gets to the fair. We want it explainable. We want it transparent. We want it secure. If you think about it from a restaurant, if you're a good cook, you want to explain what those ingredients are. We got them, they're organic, they're fresh, they're from XYZ, so that people kind of build that trust, upon your particular decisions being made. And then finally, the third thing that we usually use in our AI practice is we're always continually monitoring. You think about the chef, they're always looking for feedback. They're always looking to see, well, maybe I need to adjust the spice a little differently because this particular spice provider has a little stronger version of it than another particular provider does. So as part of that journey, that centric journey, we're always looking at those considerations, really to focus on those two pieces. From the federal side, do good, do better. We want to use AI to do better. And also to get people to use it, they need to build and understand that trust. I don't know if anyone else has similar in their fields.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we think of it as kind of three aspects of, what is, the aspects of bringing responsible AI. And I would characterize it this way. One is being very good at being reactive. Being good at being reactive. What that means is if someone comes to you and says, hey, there's a problem, things are not working well, you didn't know anything about it, but you're very, very good at identifying why something is not working well, doing the forensics, and fixing it, right? Being good at being reactive. That's the first kind of aspect of what you need to do. But the kind of things that you might want there is monitoring, or actually just dashboard, and being able to drill down into what happened. It's kind of backward-looking forensics. You have tools and frameworks in order to be good at being reactive. The second aspect of it is being good at being proactive, which is that before something goes wrong and someone tells you that something's not working, you already fix the problem, so it never gets to the point where it isn't not working. And that requires you to have tools which look at things like trends or, hey, you can imagine some kind of diagnostic solution which tells you something's going to fail well before it actually fails, versus a reactive solution would tell you why it failed after it failed, right? So the idea of good at being proactive is really having the tools in place which kind of tell you well before something happens that it's likely to happen and allows you to take corrective action. And the third aspect of it is being good at being designful, or being designful at building systems which tend to not fail in the first place, right? So this is even more strategic, where you put in place the infrastructure, the tools in order to design in those kinds of responsible features that drive reliability, that drive transparency, that drive explainability, that drive observability, all of those capabilities which allow you to then be good at being proactive and good at being reactive, right? So the kind of the designful building of systems, frameworks, products in a way that they are instrumented and built for longevity, sustainability, reliability, and responsibility, right? So I think this framework has helped us, at least as we think about tools, delivering tools to various organizations, to be able to show them where specific capabilities drive specific outcomes around reactive, proactive, and designful behavior in AI deployment.
I feel like we all need an executive order for this to work really well. So I was thinking of how the executive order sort of translates, but in our organization, we had a sponsor, a sponsor we just never would have even thought about. When I first started looking at AI, it was probably a finance. It's like, where are we gonna get the biggest ROI for this stuff? So actually it ended up being HR. So we said, how do we build a digital workforce? That was our sponsor. That was our executive order. It went to our board. They were all for it. So how do we build a digital workforce? So when you're thinking about where to start, where to get your sponsor, don't just think about your usual areas. Think about some of the other places outside of technology, outside of finance that could definitely help you progress.
Yeah, I love kind of thinking through this, people, process, technology, and tools chain of flow, right? So besides building out tools and implementing processes, we actually, during our model governance and risk management program, thought about, okay, what do we do about the people side, right? So we really, in order to get everybody to buy in to this, let's say, model governance mandate and the practices, we thought, all right, let's build a shared responsibility model to make sure everybody has a stake in this program, right? Because otherwise it will be just something else that people have to do, just one more thing amongst many other things they have to do, a checkbox they had to do. So in terms of the shared responsibility model, we borrowed heavily from, the federal, state, local type of model where each of the different tiers would have different responsibilities. They get certain powers as well, right? So it's not just, okay, something they had to check off, they get benefits in terms of distributing certain aspects of the entire responsibility.
So I think we're getting a little short. I think we're ending at 10:40. So I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to Will, actually, for this last question, or second to last question. All of us are driving AI change in different ways in different industries. I think we kind of touched on some of that. How are you currently working to build AI that effectively and safely collaborates with humans to add dollars and cents to value? And I think one of the topics we're kind of getting to is that human-machine collaboration partnership.
A great topic. Thanks, Scott. So when we look at how to build, responsible AI, how to include human judgment in the entire process, right? We thought about starting with besides the shared responsibility model that we talked about just a minute ago, from the human aspect, from a process side, we thought about, well, let's promote best practices in model development lifecycle, right? To make sure we have certain toll gates and certain control gates built into the entire process, right? And then adding technology to automate those toll gates, right? This way, human judgment is embedded into what's called the super model, right? That's the kind of risk engine that we build. So it's all built in there with human judgment. And when people use them, they get actionable advice through this whole model management lifecycle process, right? This way, we have automated the process, sped up the process, as well as building human intelligence, human judgment into it.
Also, I think, kind of going back to one of the things that I had addressed earlier, this notion of human-centered AI and responsible AI are very highly dependent, interlinked. However, they are distinct ideas. When we say human-centered AI, what you mean is this idea that rather than replacing humans, AI is seen as working side by side to amplify, augment, and make humans more effective while preserving the uniquely human things that people do, which is very, very important in many of the applications. And we already start from a deficit of trust in this area because of all the hype of humans being replaced by AI and all of that. But the reality is, we believe that the vast majority of use cases which involve AI are not kind of replacement use cases. They are augmentation, assistance, amplification use cases, especially in the enterprise. And this idea that you need to have tools and frameworks in order to be good at building solutions with longevity and sustainability when humans and AI work hand in hand is a core idea on human-centered AI. And it turns out that doing things responsibly and bringing all of the the holistic view of how AI solutions are brought to bear, that becomes then a very critical aspect of building the trust between humans and AI. So responsible AI then becomes a necessary type of capability in order to actually, you could say, actualize the vision of human-centered AI.
I think we try to wrap up with the last question for everybody. So that, I thought it was a great point. So for folks in the audience, if you, I guess we'll throw it out to everyone here. If you had to give somebody starting out or maybe in different levels of the maturity level in terms of their journey, what would be one piece of advice you'd want them to take away in terms of how to get to that better human machine collaboration and use cases or how to do it well? I don't know. What would like to start first? Go back to Will.
Yeah, thanks. That's a question I've been pondering for some time. I'm just thinking about how do we start from the beginning by build responsible AI. And I'll just kind of turn the question back to the audience, right? In terms of building responsible AI, because today I think we looked around, there's not a very high level of regulation or guidance, right? It's just a lot of things are at kind of suggestion, best practice level. So do we all think there's some kind of professional code that we can think about developing in terms of building responsible AIs that do not do harm, do not bias, right? So I'll kind of leave my comments up here, just let audience ponder, and hopefully we can get more conversations after this session. Think about, is there a need to develop a professional code of conduct within this field?
I would say it's all about the humans. So the humans are always going to be central to this, central to designing. Also, they're the ones who are going to demand that we produce these types of solutions. If you just think about the digital space, all of us have been digital for probably a very long time. And you can see how consumers have really driven the pace and the speed at which we have gone out there with new solutions. Sometimes they develop them themselves. And we're often ahead of those regulations too, even. So always just watch where the humans are going, involve them in the process, allow them to design with you. I think that would really help you be successful.
I think this idea of, in order to build better AI, humans need to understand other humans. It's not so much about understanding the technology as it's about humans understanding other humans. I would say the one thing for me is the word is scale, longevity, sustainability. As and when AI becomes a game changer for an organization, it's always going to be related to being able to deploy this technology at scale across all functions, across many, many aspects of how the organization does work. And to operate at scale, the considerations that you need to go through and the types of tools, frameworks, processes, talent, etc., you have to have in an organization to do that kind of have the transformative impact of adopting AI at scale are fundamentally different than that might be the promise of a low-hanging fruit or a one-off type of solution. So if you are in that journey where you feel that there's an opportunity for transformative change across the entire business, you have to start thinking about the tools like monitoring, explainability, the types of tools you need to keep AI working and have responsible ways in which to use data, which to use models, to use inferences, and so on in place before you can get to that level of maturity.
I'll leave it with he that controls the spice controls the universe. It comes down to data. It's data. When you think of AI, transparency, trust, you start focusing more on your data-centric aspects, getting that data in a way that is high quality, and people can understand it, and it flows back through the system. With that, I want to thank all our panelists today, and have a great conference, everyone.